From the round table at Uncle's Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of WorkCom Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, you independent contractors. My name is Steve Appel, and I'll be your host for the next hour with some talk, news, and hopefully some answers about WorkCom Matters. Thanks for being part of the show, and if you can break away from your WorkCom Matters, feel free to give us a call and clue us in with your questions, comments, and or concerns. The phone number worldwide, 818-357-4120. You can send me an email to wcexaminer@aol.com. You can be old school. Send a fax, 818-475-1437. With me in studio, my right-hand man, Dr. Mike Zima, Congressional candidate Mark Reed, my protege, attorney Robert Ozeron, Scott Walton of Uncle Studio is on the board. Back in Munich, Germany, attorney John Scalia. Back at WorkCom Central, making sure the whole damn thing goes right, is Mr. Jake Paris. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of WorkCom Matters. We've got United States Congressional Representative Mark Reed in the studio. And yes, before we say hello to him, just want to let everybody know that, of course, I did give an invite to Congressman Brad Sherman, both at the local office as well as the Washington office, and I did not get any type of response, but Mark was kind enough to come in. Good evening, Mark. How's it going? How's the campaign trail?
It's going great, Steve. It's nice to be back with you. I always have a fun time here. And you're correct. Brad Sherman has been offered several debate forums with the League of Women's Voters. He's turned them all down. With a Veterans Association, a veterans organization, he's turned it down. A synagogue, 2 churches, he's turned them all down. He does not want to be held accountable to his district. He doesn't want to answer questions. In fact, in one of his town hall meetings, he was asked by the constituents about the sexual harassment and rape allegations of his former chief of staff in his office. He deleted all of those questions from a recorded town hall meeting, which is public record. And that's an obstruction of justice as far as I'm concerned. He's not cooperating with the authorities for the full investigation of his former chief of staff because these allegations are from his office. So my mind is he does not want to be held accountable to the district and the women in the district.
And he's not only refused to debate you, he's refused to debate anybody prior to the November 6th election. Is that correct?
Well, I'm the only one on the ballot, so I'm the only one he has to debate. But he does not want to be held accountable to the district. He's going to the certain chambers of commerce luncheons, and he gets to get there and propagate about how well he's doing, and he's not being held accountable.
Well, I'll tell you, with California having a Democratic registration that considerably, it almost doubles the Republicans. If I were in his shoes, no offense, I wouldn't agree to debate you anyways. I'd want to keep things quiet and status quo.
Yeah, but the Democrat of today, the old school Democrat, anybody over 40 years old is the new Republican. The Republican Party had a bloodletting going back the last 15, 20 years where the Republicans did not like the leadership in California, so they became declined to state. So it looks like there's a major imbalance, but in my district, it's 47% Democrat registration, 27% Republican, 21% declined to state.
Declined to state or undeclared, right.
Those are all Republicans that got tired of the leadership of the Republican Party.
And I think California statewide, this is the first year where the decline to state have exceeded the number of the actual Republicans. Republicans are now third.
Exactly. And the Democrats now, based on the Kavanaugh hearings, are going, wait a minute. Just like in 2002, you had a huge turnout of Democrats voting Republican because they did not like the values and the representation of their party, of their values. And we're going to have the same, I honestly believe we're going to have the same thing. People are going to show up to the polls right now because of values. They're going to say, look, does the Democrat Party espouse the values I believe in? And based on those hearings of law and order and due process, they're going to show up, I think, in droves and say, you know what, I don't support it. I don't like it. No more. You're going in the wrong direction. And they're going to teach the party, the DNC, a lesson about going in the wrong direction. I honestly believe it because I'm getting a lot of support from Democrats. I'm being invited into temples and synagogues to speak. I went into, because Donald Trump repealed the Johnson Act, I'm being supported heavily by all the Christian churches, the pastors, and so forth. I did a worldwide television program this morning for the Nicaraguans and El Salvadorians, because they're all coming out about values, family values. They do not want the government targeting them and destroying their lives, because that's what happened to Kavanaugh. Whether you believe, Miss Ford, Dr. Ford or not, or believe Kavanaugh, it doesn't matter. It's all about the due process. Can somebody come in and say, Steve, I saw you with somebody, I know you did, 40 years ago, and your whole life gets tossed up in the air and destroyed completely? No, that's not right. That's not the American way.
Now, Robert and Mike, we both know, because we're in workers' compensation, the definition of due process is notice and opportunity to be heard.
That's the bottom line with
the
concept.
And clearly Dr. Ford did have the notice and opportunity to be heard, arguably for over 36 years. And then, in my opinion, it was the Democrats and Dianne Feinstein that basically delayed that till the very end, which, of course, in my opinion, totally backfired on her. But I really don't want to talk about Kavanaugh unless the three of you, we had four shows in a row on Kavanaugh.
Steve, the due process aspect of that was denied her, not the 36 years. There's a lot of sexual harassment and rape victims, even incest victims, that don't come out for years. The due process part that was denied her was when she brought her letter to the first congresswoman in Palo Alto. She should have said right off the bat, I'm going to fly you out to Maryland. You're going to open up a police report. You're going to legitimize your claim by opening a police report. From there, once you do that, I'm going to take you to the FBI, and you're going to open up a case there and plead your case there. We can keep it completely confidential at this point, and we'll see if it can go
limitations.
Further. There is no statute of limitations in Maryland.
Oh,
exactly.
But the alleged event occurred in California.
No, it happened in Maryland.
Oh, my mistake. Okay.
There was no statute of limitations on this. So her due process was denied because the Democrat Party went ahead and weaponized this, and they did the same thing in Anita Hill with Clarence Thomas. They waited till the 11th hour, 59 minutes, and they said, we can't stop it, so let's throw this monkey wrench in there. So this is where her due process, her rights were completely violated as far as I'm concerned. And then the press went ahead and, being complicit, destroyed Kavanaugh's life by putting it out there, these allegations, which were not substantiated or verified.
So, Mark, you think this is going to backfire on the Dems?
It's backfiring now on the Dems.
You see it now?
I see it now. I have people coming up to me in the district talking to me about it. I have Democrats supporting me now because my opinion in the political arena is I don't really care if you're Democrat or Republican. Your representative is supposed to represent you in the district.
And the issues.
And the issue. That's representing you. They're supposed to be your advocate going to Washington, D.C., whether you're a Republican or Democrat. So when you had this egregious act by the Democrat Party, and especially by Cory Booker and by Kamala Harris and Feinstein, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are looking to become the president nominees or candidates in 2020. They don't care about what due process is or American law. They were looking at, how do I launch my campaign? And I think it's backfired on them as well. They're not going to be taken serious as presidential candidates because they really screwed themselves up. But the entire 9 of the Democrats on that committee, 9 or 10 on that committee, they were complicit in it. They really showed the American Democrat, which is not a bad person, like I said, the American Democrat, they showed that that's not their value system, because the Democrats are not evil people. They're center left. They got center right. They work together to get the best possible legislation done. But what happened in those hearings was an egregious crime against law and order and due process.
My name is Steve Appel. You're listening to Work Comp Matters. Our guest tonight is Mark Reed, congressional candidate for my congressional district. We're brought to you by A1 Law, Santa Monica Tickets, and, of course, ABC Rugs. I would like to talk about the propositions that are coming up on the midterm elections November 6th. Specifically, the two that are the hot buttons are Prop 6 and Prop 10. Now, Prop 6 is interesting. That is the gas tax repeal. But it's not listed as the gas tax repeal. It's officially listed as eliminates certain road repair and transportation funding, requires certain fuel taxes and vehicle fees to be approved by the electorate. Now, my understanding is that when the gas tax was initially put in on the last elections last year, it added a 12% state tax per gallon, and it was sort of ramrodded through the legislature, and now, of course, we have Prop 6, which will repeal. What's your take on that? Additionally, I find that the writing, the explanation of Prop 6 is purposely written to mislead the voting public. What's your take?
Well, this isn't the first time a proposition has been written in an extremely misleading direction to get the voters to vote for it.
And that's directly right in the lap of the Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, exactly.
And the Secretary of State has the authority to fashion and write these propositions any way they want. And we as the voter, the only way we can eliminate that is to vote out the Secretary of State, right?
Yeah, it's Alex Padilla. Yes.
Alex Padilla, yeah.
Yeah, they get to pick and choose who writes the pros and the cons of each of the bills. And when you look at the pros and the cons, you go, what the heck was written? You can't even understand it. But the truth of Prop 6, I'm voting yes to repeal the gas tax.
As am I.
Absolutely. Because if you look at the bill, 80% of that money doesn't go to repairs and road repairs. 80% of it goes to EPA projects, for beautification projects. 20% of it, which is not a lot of money, goes to actual road repairs. And it really doesn't go to road repairs. It goes to buttressing up the unions' pension plans, okay, the unions that build these roads. Something I brought up to you earlier, and that is how many hundreds of billions of dollars we already send to the federal government and the state government for road or for gas tax now. On the federal side, since I'm running for U.S. Congress, you have a Republican Congressional caucus and you have a Democrat Congressional caucus that have to advocate for Department of Transportation grant money. That's to bring projects here and to be paid for from the money that we send to the feds, okay, on our gas tax. In 2016, they had one project in Long Beach, $53 million, and that's it. Feinstein came out and said they really failed the state of California. Yeah, by hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, because we have $700 billion worth of repair and replace projects of the infrastructure in the state of California. It's complete mismanagement of the funds that they have. I don't think they're deserving of any more funds until we can hold them accountable to what they have already gotten.
There absolutely needs to be more transparency regarding where our tax dollars are being spent.
Massive audits.
Absolutely.
Just like the DMV. There needs to be a massive audit of DMV.
Actually, Mike, I think we have a story today on the DMV, right?
Yeah, I believe we do.
But go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so to me, it's just a hands down vote yes to repeal the gas tax. That's it. I mean, it's more money going to the general fund for the government, the state government, to waste on nothing.
And then, of course, we have Proposition 10, which is listed as expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. What do you know? What's your take on Prop 10?
Prop 10 effectively repeals the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, which is a statewide law that governs rent control already. What it does is it repeals the Hawkins law and replaces it with city boards to control rent. So the city board, city council can tell you, Steve, you've got a house that's worth $500,000. You got this much more. You can only make 3% above what you're spending on it. This is a communist move, and it's not going to help housing. It's going to decrease housing. I'm a landlord. I own a few houses that I rent out. My opinion on it is I'm not going to rent them out. I'm going to cash in and sell the houses. And it's not going to help people with rent. So it's not going to do anything. It's going to create more of a housing shortage in the state of California than what we see now.
As we all know, rental prices have been going up in the past year and a half. And they've said recently it's pretty much plateaued. The average or the median one-bedroom apartment or rental is about $1,350, $1,400, and it's pretty much plateaued out. And either people can't afford to pay it anymore or are refusing to pay it anymore.
Well, they're refusing, but if you look at the new buildings that are being built in Santa Monica, the average little one-bedroom apartment over there is $3,500.
And Santa Monica, though, is one of the most enforceable rent control municipalities in
They've
California.
had rent control for years.
Yeah, for years, right?
years.
Exactly.
And that's what's driven the prices up, skyrocketing. Now, I know as a landlord, okay, my property taxes go up, my insurances go up, certain costs go up. I have to put those on to the renter, the leasee. And even my leasee, as a good landlord, I take care of the person that's in my house because he pays me. On the first of the month, the check is there. So his lease came up, and I said, look, if you want to stay there another 2-year lease, you can stay there because you have your check there. And he goes, well, I was hoping to get a $200 a month reduction.
Oh, yeah, keep dreaming.
No, and it's a legitimate request. He's proving that he's a good, renter, a leasee, and I'm a good landlord, and we're going to negotiate it out. And I said, well, look, Lou, here's the issue. My property taxes are going to go up this year anywhere from $700 to $1,500 more, which is going to should increase your rent by anywhere from $75 to $150. I said, I'm going to eat that because you pay every month. I don't have to chase you down. I'm not going to lose a couple months trying to find a new leasee.
He probably is also not complaining that a screw fell out of his screen or whatever, and bring a handyman for $100 or $100 or whatnot to fix it.
He's taking care of the place, which I appreciate more than anything. So I want him to stay there because I've had a couple people rent the place or lease the place, and they've destroyed it. They did over $100,000 worth of damage. One of them did $100,000 worth of damage. The state and the city do not compensate me for my loss, but they want to charge me for my gains. And it's like, give me a break. If you want to compensate me for a bad leasee that stays in there and I have to pay all the money to evict them, and then I lose all the rent and everything else and the damages to the house, if you want to compensate me for that, you can have all the rent control you want.
Let me bring up another topic which we've discussed both times you were here before and is now as prevalent as ever, is the homeless. And in fact, Mike, there's been a tent that has been there is a tent that has been right on the sidewalk of our office building for the past 2 weeks. I actually saw a black and white police car out front of there yesterday, but the tent is still there. We all know what the homeless problem is, Mark, but the question is there a solution? Really quickly, they say that in California, we have about 100 to 110,000 homeless in California, and about half of them, about 50,000 of them, are in Los Angeles. Is there a solution to this problem?
Absolutely, there's a solution.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it.
There's 3 categories of homeless. You have the mental health care, the people that have mental problems, and that's the reason why they're on the streets. Then you have the drug addicts that are on the streets, and they're just bumming around and stealing to get their drugs. Then you have the person who has fallen on hard times. The systems that are there now by the county, by the city, by faith-based organizations and private organizations, they're getting those people off the street because they want help. So they're getting the help. The ones that are being left on the street now
are the ones that don't want help.
They don't want help because they have a mental disease going on. Whether it's drug addiction is a mental disease, period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, but there's an avenue to take care of it. Back in the late 80s, when Ronald Reagan took away the funding for mental health care institutions, federally run and funded ones, short-term and long-term mental health care institutions, it created the problem. And there's been a tremendous amount of articles written on it that we are suffering the consequences for that now. The city was sued, and the county of Orange County was sued, and Los Angeles County was sued by the ACLU to prevent them from enforcing the vagrancy laws. Okay, so now they said you have to have beds. If you're going to enforce the vagrancy law, you have to have a bed for them to go to. Well, both counties said, well, it's cheaper to just not enforce it, so they don't enforce it. So right now in our prison system, 30 to 40% of the prisoners have mental health care needs. They think that they're going to give them the services in it. That just makes them worse. 60% to 70% of all of the inmates in there have a drug problem going on. So obviously we are addressing the problem in the wrong direction. I have a proposal on my website, very simple, federal intake centers. and you get the worst of the worst off the street. Somebody calls up and says, I've got some guy running down the street half naked, going to the bathrooms in the street, talking gibberish and walking around in circles. Obviously, something wrong with the guy. The police show up and they say, look, you have two options. Either we're going to arrest you for vagrancy law, we're going to bring you to jail, you're going to go up in an arraignment in 3 days, or we can take you to this federal intake center where you're going to get housed, you're going to get full assessments of what your needs are. During that 30 days, of course, they'll be fed, clothed, housed, assessed. Their family is going to be contacted to find out what is their backstory, what's going on with this person, whether it's a kid or an adult. Find out what's going on with them. What they need now, and the psychiatric community has joined forces with me on this, saying there's no follow-through on any of the services that are being offered
Basically,
now.
treat them and street them.
You treat them and street them, or they house them for 6 months, they throw them back out on the street, and they're not fixed. They still have the same problems they had before. So you need short-term and long-term mental health care facilities outside of the community, because if you're going to try to treat them in the community in these bridge homes they're talking about, that doesn't get the stress off of them. You go on vacation, right, Steve?
I do.
When you come back into the city,
I can.
When you come back into the city, do you feel the stress of the city?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So you're taking a person who's living on the streets, who's gone through a really hard time. Their mental stability has been pushed to the limits, and you're going to try to treat them in a home on their own, throw them in a one-bedroom apartment with a bed and a little TV in the room, and you say, okay, you're all better now. And the wraparound services they're offering is voluntary. They don't have to utilize them. They're just put in a room. Is that going to fix them? No. You have to have something that takes the stress load off of them. You have to have something that's going to give them the services, and you have to have something that has follow through with it. And it takes a while. This is going to be a commitment. The money is there. The feds have allocated out over I think it's $10 billion already with the opioid, mental health care, and homelessness issues.
And we've got $2.5 billion in the general fund in California, which is just sitting there for it's earmarked for mental illness.
There's a total of $8 billion for mental illness, homelessness, and drug rehabilitation. On HHH money, there's $6.75 billion as well. We have the money. The problem is we don't have the leadership of putting together a real program.
We don't know where and how to spend it. Right, exactly.
Exactly, and they're talking about that constantly. And like I said, the faith-based organizations, the people who are working on it now, they're doing a fantastic job with the people who want help. But that's not the problem people are facing. What people are facing on the street is the people with mental health care issues that are a danger to themselves, a danger to the community, and people with major drug addiction. Okay, they estimated because of, 57, that you can go out and steal $950 worth of products?
I don't know.
I think it was 57 or 47 is the one that does that. You can steal, and it's only a slap on the hand.
A misdemeanor.
It's a misdemeanor.
Decriminalize certain property offenses. Yes,
exactly. So these guys are out, stealing stuff. Well, they've estimated the state of California is going to lose $58 billion worth of retail merchandise. $58 billion. How many homeless in L.A.? 55,000?
55,000, sure.
So let's say we take half of that $25 billion of lost product, $8 billion worth of HH money. We can't figure out something? Is it leadership stupid here or what? I mean, nobody's coming up with solutions. That's the solution I'm proposing. I'm getting a tremendous amount of support from the psychiatric community as well. I have a whole team behind me that's going to implement it. We will bring these programs and make a pilot program here in the county of Los Angeles, and we will prove that it does work. And this is what the people in the communities want, because you should see the uprising, Steve, at the, neighborhood council meetings when they have it on homelessness. People are up in arms, and they have justification for it. We were talking about property taxes earlier. Ask yourself, you got $1 million home, you're paying $14,000 to $15,000 a year in property taxes. You're giving the county of Los Angeles a payment of $1,500 a month. What are you getting for it? You don't get police. You can call the cops up. Any property damage that happens to your house or your car's out front, they tell you, come on in. It's a civil issue. Turn it in your insurance company. We'll write up a report, but you have to come in. If your house gets burglarized, they're not going to come flying out there to take a report. If the fire department gets called, they'll be there just in time to put the ashes out because they're underfunded as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are you getting for your property taxes? Prisons? Well, no. AB 109, the realignment, they're putting them all back out on the streets. What are you getting for the property taxes? Absolutely nothing. So we have an uprising of people that own houses saying, I am legitimized and I'm not going to feel guilty about not wanting some mobile home dumping its brown water and gray water out front of my house and living there and sitting there having parties all through the night and ruckus and racketing, and I'm paying property taxes, I'm paying a mortgage payment, I'm going to work 60 hours a week. No, I'm done with it. I'm tired of it. Fix it. And they're turning to their leadership and saying, fix it. And they're still not fixing it. They're still happy about putting Band-Aids on it.
You're listening to Mark Reed on WorkComp Matters. My name is Steve Appel. We're brought to you by A1 Law, Santa Monica Tickets, and, of course, ABC Rugs. We're going to be back with more state and federal issues as well as the local news, but it's time to get our regular segment from our regular contributor. He's hanging out in Munich, Germany, with his regular segment on WorkComp Matters, attorney John Scalia.
Hi, this is John with the WorkComp International Report from Munich. This week I'm going to talk about a timely topic in America, violence against women, but in a specific context. I'm going to talk about the National Collegiate Athletic Association, which is the governing body for college sports. So I'm going to talk about college sports. First of all, let me make a couple things clear. One, I'm a fan. I love college sports. After I graduated law school at UCLA, I bought season seats for both football and basketball, and I didn't miss very many games. Two, I'm also a parent who's had a son compete at Division I baseball at the NCAA level. That's at West Point. Yes, I know, hard to believe, but West Point does play Division I athletics. And when you do, you have to go through the NCAA clearinghouse to make sure you're academically eligible. Well, if you know the academic standards at West Point, that's a joke, but nonetheless, they have to go through it. So, secondly, let me point out that the National Collegiate Athletic Association, for all its talk of amateur purity, is a multi-billion-dollar business. That's right, that's billion with a B, not M's. So we're talking mega business here. Now, in the greater context of society, college athletics is a source of pride. It's a source of pride to the institution, and it's a source of pride to the country in times. What do I mean by that? Well, there have been lots of studies that show that when there's success on the athletic field, contributions to the school increase greatly, not just to the athletic department, but more importantly to the overall university. And every university is familiar with that metric. It's a source of pride. Secondly, it's a source of pride for the surrounding community and sometimes the nation. For example, in Los Angeles, we have 2 Division I institutions, both of whom have supplied plenty of Olympic athletes. That's a source of pride to all the alumni at UCLA and SC, okay? So, it is a source of pride. Now, we come to the subject of how women are treated in the NCAA. And you can say, well, John, aren't they treated equally? Because there's Title IX, which guarantees equality. Well, yeah, Title IX guarantees economic equality, sort of, but it certainly doesn't guarantee equality of treatment. That became really apparent recently when the U.S. women's soccer team was scheduled to fly economy class while the men were flying first class. Once that became public, it was so embarrassing they changed it and said, oops, that was just a mistake. The irony here, of course, is that the women's team is far more successful than the men's team and is nationally ranked as one of the top teams in the world, whereas the men are lucky to get in the top 20. However, those are the facts. Now, women are still treated as objects. What do I mean by that? Well, there's been 2 high-profile cases recently of sexual abuse in the NCAA, both at very successful athletically schools. One was at Ohio State, where an assistant football coach was accused and documented of having committed a battery, a physical assault on his wife. And it was not the first time. And it was the same assistant coach who had had the same problem when he worked under the same head coach, Urban Meyer, when Meyer was the coach at Florida. The school investigated finally when it became public and embarrassing and concluded that, well, yeah, Meyer should have known about this. I guess we got to penalize him. So, yeah, they made him sit out the first 3 games. That's what beating up your wife or not reporting a beating amounts to. But it gets worse than that. The worst profile case is Michigan State. Michigan State, the team doctor, was accused for at least 10 years by various women, girls, students, of sexually abusing them during his exams. And they were all told, you're misunderstanding. It's part of a medical exam. You don't really know what's going on. And this went on for like 10 years until finally it became so overwhelming that the school had to do something about it. Well, the doctor is no longer a doctor. His name is Larry Nassar. He's now a prisoner. He's been sentenced to 130 years for abusing like 30 girls minimum. And that's what happened. But it took all those years of reporting and public pressure before Michigan State did anything. Okay, so what do we learn from this? What we learn from this is women, first of all, are afraid to report sexual abuse. Why? Well, you can see why. Because when they do report it, they get ignored. This is what happened for years and years in Michigan State. And then it's belittled, okay? So that when they do it, they are afraid to report it. Look at the Me Too movement. Those are successful Hollywood women who were afraid to report abuse at the hands of Harvey Weinstein for years and years and years. And people say, oh, you're just exaggerating. I don't think so. Finally, women get disbelieved and they get mocked even after they report it. Okay? I mean, look at what's happened to poor Christine Blasey Ford. Can't even go back to her house. Yeah. So if you have a daughter and she gets sexually assaulted in high school, you can tell her what's going to happen to her in America. 1, she's going to be ignored. 2, if she's afraid, and finally, through therapy and eventually has the courage to come out and say it, she's going to be disbelieved. And 3rd, at the end of it all, the guy who attacked her will be put on the Supreme Court. That's the View from Munich this week.
And John, thank you very much for talking about that. Appreciate it. And John is going to be live in studio next week, and he might have his boxing gloves on. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Well, it's going to be great to see him again.
It's going to be great to see him again. That'll be awesome. We've got, my name is Steve Appel. You're listening to Work Comp Matters. We're brought to you by A1 Law, Santa Monica Tickets, ABC Rugs. U.S. Congressional candidate Mark Reed is in studio talking about the issues that matter. We're going to be talking to him, but first we've got our musical break. And here's some Glenn Laughlin and the Cherry Blue Storms. Baby, You're a Rich Man.
How does it feel to be one of the beautiful people? Now that you know who you are, what do you want to be? And have you traveled very far, far as the eye can see? Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man too. You keep all your money in a big brown bag. Inside is new. What a thing to do. How does it feel to be one of the beautiful people? How often have you been there? Often enough to know. What did you see when you were there? Nothing that doesn't show. Baby, you're a rich man. Man too. You keep all your money in a big brown bag. Inside a zoo. What a thing to do. How does it feel to be one of the beautiful people?
Glenn Laughlin and the Cherry Blue Storms on Work Comp Matters. My name is Steve Appel. Extremely powerful hurricane Michael crashed into Florida's northwestern panhandle coast today, flooding towns and ripping up trees with 155-mile-per-hour winds. A devastating storm surge is possible.
U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, has given notice she will resign at the end of the year. And you know, folks, I would just love to have a crystal ball and see what she's doing.
You think she's going to run for? You think she's going to run for president?
Not 2020, maybe 2024. I don't know. I think she's going to have another role in Trump's White House. I don't know what it is, but I just think that she's very effective. I know some people may not agree with that, but I think she's very effective and a very good candidate to do something.
I think she was extremely effective, and I think she espouses what the founding fathers really wanted our representatives to do, and that is serve a certain amount of limited time in government and get out. She was on the hot seat as the governor for 6 years, and then she became the UN ambassador for 2 years, and she's getting out of it.
South Carolina, right? South Carolina.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I think she has served our country extremely well. It's time for her to take a little break, and I think that's what she wants to do. If she comes back, I don't care what role she comes back in, and she is extremely effective. She's a great communicator. She is strong, and she is intelligent.
Do you think maybe we could have a cabinet position for the homeless, or is that too specific?
I think that that falls under the Department of Health and HUD as well.
Housing and Urban Development.
Right, and the Health Department as well handles a lot of that, and that's where a lot of the what do you call the new bills and money that's come from is specifically for that.
Robert, you got story number 3.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh has been confirmed as our latest Associate U.S. Supreme Court Justice. Judge Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, heard his first case yesterday.
President Donald Trump signed legislation protecting sports medicine professionals traveling with sports teams by ensuring their license and liability insurance remains in effect even when they cross state lines. The Sports Medicine Licensing Clarity Act of 2018, as the bill is known, was included in a large unrelated piece of legislation, H.R. 302, that passed the Senate overwhelmingly on October 3. The president signed the bill into law last Friday.
Wouldn't it be nice if they can just sign a law that allows us to shop for our health care plans across state line?
Well, I think we can. No one's preventing us from buying our own health care.
Well, you have the different insurance companies that are limited into the states that you're there, but you can't go to another state to get a health care plan. You're limited by the companies that are in your state.
I didn't know that.
That's why so many of the healthcare insurance companies are pulling out of the different states because they're not making money in them.
No, that I know. A bunch of companies around all across are pulling out of California because it's too expensive to operate in California.
Exactly. So you can't go across state lines and buy it. You have to work and shop within the companies that are in your state that are offering you insurance policies in your state, and that's it.
Because they have to be licensed in the state to sell in the state. Mike, you've got the next story.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, 'tis the time of year for all rabid Dodger fans to begin frothing at the mouth. The baseball playoffs are on, and it looks like the Dodgers are in a good position to advance again to the World Series. You gotta believe.
Absolutely. The California Department of Motor Vehicles has come under intense scrutiny again this week after admitting that it mistakenly registered 1,500 individuals to vote, prompting a sharp rebuke from the Secretary of State and other government officials in Sacramento. It's the latest controversy for the agency, which last month announced it had botched over 23,000 separate voter registrations. Mark, I got to ask you because you're here. Tell me about voter fraud. Is it real? Is it realistic? Does it permeate our system? Is it something we should be worried about?
Dean Logan removed 140,000 voters off the registration rolls right here in L.A. County, calling it a glitch. We have such an assault on the integrity of our election process, regardless of where it's coming from. I do believe there is voter fraud or the ability for voter fraud. I would like to see on a federal level coming back in and just making the election day a paid holiday where you can do early voting if you wanted to, but on the second Tuesday of November, you can go in from 12 hours, from 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night and vote, show your employer your voting stub, and you get paid for the day.
Well, that's already existing law in California. My understanding, if the employer cannot accommodate your time to vote, he has to pay you to go vote. But if you can vote before your 8 hours or after your 8 hours, you're fine. And if you cannot do that, then the employer is required to pay you for your time to vote. Mike, isn't that true?
I'm not certain when you say pay, if an hour or two or all day.
Well, yeah. How long does it take to vote?
A couple hours, maybe?
An hour, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm talking about creating it to be an all-day
I
day
heard you.
off.
I heard you.
Yes, encourage people in their civic
Mark,
duty.
that sounds awfully democratic to me. Am I wrong?
Very, very, very common sense.
I would be total. Okay, it may be common sense, but at least when you're hitting me with it right, and we never discuss this off mic, I would be totally against that because I would not want to give Mike and my other employees the entire day off to go vote.
Why not?
Because I figure all it takes is an hour or 90 minutes, and if they cannot vote before work or after work, I would pay them for an hour. I would give them an hour's paid time to vote.
Mark,
but
wouldn't
the
it be a
whole day
lot
off?
of dough for employers to pay?
Yeah,
Wouldn't there be a
Robert,
backlash?
would you want? Robert,
I think the voting system needs to be overhauled entirely. Listen, we have our bank accounts and all that on our cell phones with our thumb pad as authentication of who you are. I think voting should probably go the same direction.
Speaking of that, and
It should be from your
Mark,
smartphone, and you should authenticate who you are.
I know you want to get into the voting thing, but what about cybercrime? That is starting to permeate every aspect of our lives, and my concern is if and when it permeates the banks and the savings and loans, if it hasn't done already. What's your take on cyber attacks, both within the United States, around the world, and how real is it?
It's extremely real. I think Donald Trump, President Trump and this administration is addressing that and creating a commission to really address cybercrime. It is real. It is there, and we need to address it. I believe it was Lenin said it way back that the United States will fall on its own technology.
Which Lenin?
Which Lenin?
I mean, John Lennon or the Russian
Vladimir.
Lenin?
I think you referred to Lenin.
Vladimir,
Elliot, not John Lennon.
Vladdy.
Knock it off, Steve.
I couldn't help myself. Sorry.
I get in a roll in a different direction, and you throw a monkey wrench in there.
No, go ahead.
No, but
well, at least I'm not talking about farm animals. Go ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We really need to address it because it is there. I mean, you're looking at cybercrime, the intellectual property, theft from China. You're looking at it all over the place. Unless we start hardening these things up, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Robert, you've got the next news story.
Google unveiled new versions of its Pixel smartphone, a high-end challenger to Apple's iPhone and Samsung's Galaxy phones. Google also introduced a smart speaker in response to products from Amazon and Microsoft.
SpaceX launched another rocket from Vandenberg Air Force Base this past Sunday, and Southern Californians can expect to see more spectacular shows just like it.
Robert, can I ask you, the election process and the voting process to be handled over the phone, does that not just present more cybersecurity problems?
No, you can definitely have it secure. Listen, it doesn't have to be over your phone. It's a digital database like a cloud that you log into using your thumbprint or some sort of other secure ID, right? You can log in from your phone. There's probably voting stations. I mean, listen, there's a red box at the 7-Eleven. I can get a movie, right? Everyone can watch movies from their phone. You log into your bank from an ATM or from your phone. I don't see why voting can't go the same way. And it's probably more likely to have authentication, right? You can have a thumbprint. You can have test questions every time you log in. There's, you take your exams online. There are whole college degrees you can get online. There's a lot of things you can do online. I'm surprised that the voting has been so slow to actually adapt.
Well, I think and I want to ask this of Mark. I think it's because the candidates and the politicians don't want to make voting so easy. Because if voting became so easy, then all of a sudden you throw a commercial, a whole barrage of commercials, and it changes everybody's opinion. Mark, let me ask you, do you like voting the way it is? Do you want to make it easier? Do you want us to be able to vote by the internet or by our cell phones?
No, I disagree with you, Robert. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for voter fraud and election fraud in any electronic situation like that. We're watching right now in my district, just to give you an idea, and this is
my district too.
In your district too. The average.
And Scott's district too.
Yeah,
exactly. The average turnout on the non-presidential cycle for elections,
25%.
No, I got numbers. It's actually 68,000 to 70,000 voters. Okay, now I'll ask you, Steve, was there anything extraordinary on this primary ballot that would have made people turn out in droves?
Rent control?
No, that's on the general.
Tax.
I was going to say most of the gas tax, and I think a lot of people
No, that's on the general. On the primary, was there anything extraordinary?
No.
There was absolutely
Not that I
nothing.
recall. No.
Okay, this election cycle, 140,000 ballots were cast. Okay, it's double the amount than in the past 10 non-presidential
they're expecting
cycles.
A huge turnout for November.
In the general, a lot of people don't turn out in the primary. They will turn out in the general. Okay, now of those numbers, 68,000 people voted by mail. 12,800 people voted by provisional ballot. 62,000 voted in person. What does that tell you? Where's the room for fraud? Because the ballots, until somebody takes all of those envelopes and looks at each voter and say, are you alive? Are you in the state of California? And the ones that you determined are not alive and are not in the state of California anymore, you take the leftover ones and you call them up and say, did you vote by mail? Yes or no? Until you do that exhaustive process, you will not know how many people really voted by mail.
And you just made me think to the suggestion of my suggestion voting by internet, Robert's suggestion voting by phone.
Mine is by internet too. It's an electronic database that you could authenticate a list.
If a candidate demands a recount, how are you going to do that when people are voting by internet or by phone?
You can't.
You can't.
You can check verifications
Okay.
on every electronic signature.
Okay, they're not doing that now on the paper trail. They're not going to do that on the electronic because of the cost involved. The candidate that I ran against, one of the Democrats I ran against, asked for a ballot recount. He got through maybe 7 precincts, and that's it. It cost him $16,000. Each one of those, and I told him straight out, you're not going to find the fraud there. Because once the ballot is supposedly pulled out of the envelope, it gets mixed in. You have no idea. There's no interlocking numbers to prove which ballot is there. So once that is removed from the envelope, so who's to say that envelope, that ballot got thrown out and they put in their own ballot? They stuffed them. Okay, you don't know because there's no process. The County of Los Angeles doesn't even print their own ballots. They have somebody else print them in an unsecured location. They have another mail house mail them out in an unsecured location. They're returned to that mail house unsecured and then delivered to the County of Los Angeles. How do you know for sure there's no fraud? You don't know that, and nobody's going to spend the $300,000. That's for one congressional district. It's going to cost you $400,000 to $500,000 to figure out, which districts and how many of them.
Clearly, another issue that has permeated everybody's lives is gun control. With all of the killings that have been going on, what's your take on gun control? Do we need to change the law? Do we need to enforce the law? Do we need education? Do we need to raise the ages? What's your take? And also, handguns versus rifles, shotguns, assault weapons.
2016 FBI stats, 252 people were murdered by rifles. 1,644 people were killed with knives. 700 people were killed with bare hands and feet. 450 people were killed with blunt objects. Obviously, that's not the issue. I am a strong Second Amendment supporter because it is a constitutional right, a God-given right, and the government is not giving me that right to own or not own a gun. However, with that being said, I do believe in strong laws and prosecution of anybody who commits crimes with guns. Jerry Brown took away the sentence enhancement for people committing crimes with guns. Why? If he's a strong person against guns, don't you think if somebody committed a crime with a gun, you'd want to enhance their sentence and give them more? Absolutely. So we need to have programs or legislation that keeps the guns out of mental people that have been prosecuted for mental health care issues.
Well, that's a good question. Should someone who has a mental disease be allowed to own a gun?
If they've been determined by their therapist or psychiatrist they're a danger to themselves or the community, absolutely through due process, they should be brought into a court.
But if they're not a danger to themselves or anybody else, then someone who has a mental defect is entitled to the freedoms of the Second Amendment,
absolutely,
just like anybody else.
Because there's a lot of veterans that are returning from war that have mental defects but are not a danger to themselves or the community. Mm-hmm. It's only if you go through the due process that you've been determined by a psychiatrist that you're a danger to yourself and or the community. But that law should be extended. I think we should have a federal registry, and all city, county, and states should be into that federal registry. I believe in a 21-day hold.
Absolutely.
There should be a 21-day hold on getting new guns. I got a whole bunch of propositions I'll put forward, but a 21-day hold. The Fed should look at all people that have had their Second Amendment removed by due process, and that's part of the background check. Okay, it's a must. But then you penalize any of these state, county, or city institutions that do not report this. That killing that happened in Texas, the guy was dishonorably discharged from the Air Force. He beat up his wife.
Is this the one at the church?
Yes, the one at the church,
okay,
where an NRA guy killed the guy. A guy with a gun, legal gun owner, stopped an illegal gun owner, an irresponsible gun owner. But this guy was dishonorably discharged from the Air Force. Okay, that you lose your Second Amendment rights for. He was convicted of spousal abuse. You lose your Second Amendment rights for that. He got out. He went home. He beat up his girlfriend, was convicted of it, lost his Second Amendment rights again. The Navy, the Air Force didn't report it. The Texas courts didn't report it to the feds or the state DOJ. So he was able to buy a gun in the state of Texas. He went to the state next to him and bought another gun. Okay, this is where we have a systemic failure. So we have to address those issues. I also believe that a new gun owner or a person who's buying a gun that they're not familiar with, just like driving a car, you have to get a driver's license. You got to go through classes, written classes and operational classes. I think you should do the same thing with a gun. I also think that the handgun and long gun safety certificate that you have should require that you visit the gun range at least once a year to show your proficiency with your gun that you can use it. Because owning a gun for home defense goes way beyond the normal person's ability to pull a gun on somebody and kill them if they break into their house. And they should know all the laws pertaining to doing that, because you may end up in prison before the guy who broke into your house ends up in prison. So there's a whole bunch of real responsible legislation to prevent useless killings in schools and in workplace and in homes and accidentals and everything else. But I don't believe in penalizing the responsible gun owner. I think we imprison the people who are using guns in crimes, and that's it.
All good takes. Immigration is always a hot button. Immigration, the wall, what's your take?
Okay, the wall is a symptom of a complete failure of the United States Congress to address our immigration policies and reform. Okay, so I'm all for the wall.
Failure or refusal?
Failure.
Oh, go ahead.
Flat
Go ahead.
failure.
Go ahead.
Refusal is failure. If you refuse to go to work, you failed your wife. Okay, it doesn't matter. Use whatever word you want to use on that. You failed. All right. So it's a complete failure of Congress on both sides of the aisle. They should have reformed our immigration policies a long time ago. However, now it's become a national security issue, preventing people from bringing things across the border that we don't want and people that we don't want, called ISIS terrorists and so forth. So yes, it is imperative at this point for national security. Now, immigration, you don't have to tackle the whole onion in one kick. You can take one layer off at a time. First layer that needs to be addressed, we need to stop taking asylum requests right at the border. That should stop. We should have functional embassies in Mexico, in Central America, and the 5 states down in South America, to where somebody wants to apply for an asylum application and their lives are really in danger, they can live right there at the embassy until it's processed and they're okay to come to the United States. They could be flown over here. But we have 700,000 unprocessed asylum requests because they're done at the border. That should stop. Flat out stop.
And of course, a big part of our audience is workers' compensation, and we deal with drugs. Of course, in the past 365 days, we've had a lot of talk, a lot of proposed legislation about the opioid epidemic. What's your take on the current opioid epidemic?
We lose a person every 3 minutes to fentanyl and opioid overdose. It is an epidemic. There's no doubt it's an epidemic. And there's a couple processes reasons for it. One of them is the insurance company, even workman's comp. They will sit there and prescribe you opioids, painkillers, whatever strengths, whatever ones, because they don't want to give you the surgery to fix the problem. I've already gone through that. They were willing to deny me an epidural for my neck. They denied me that, and that was supposed to help fix it. After a year of fighting them, they approved a 2-disc fusion and a 2-disc replacement with prosthetic discs. So 4 of my discs were going to be worked on, but they were giving me all the opioids I wanted, flat out. That's got to stop. We got to have the insurance companies okay the repair and fixing of the problems that are creating pain. That's number one to me. And we know that because the overtime with the police department on workman's comp, denial of surgeries and so forth, it drags it out to the point to where it's outrageous. I think it's 30% of the cops are on workman's comp of workplace injuries. So workman's comp is failing, but insurance companies in general are failing.
Well, I would say, and Robert and Mike, as with the deadliest catch, where if you're going to go crab fishing, 100% you're going to get injured. I would think that if you're a policeman or a fireman, 100% you're going to get injured. Now, to what extent, that's a whole other issue. Wouldn't you agree?
Most officers who serve would have injuries, I'd say. I don't know about 100%. Maybe they got desk duty, right?
Well, unless they have desk duty their entire career.
Well, absolutely. But the issue is let's say you go in, you get injured. That's fine. It's a workplace injury. It's legitimate. Oh, yeah. You go into your doctor. Your doctor says, we got to do this surgery and this surgery. There shouldn't be this 6-month process for approval.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Well,
yes.
I think that goes with your health insurance issue there, is that if there was a more competitive marketplace, there'd probably be more competition to bring the best product to market. That's the same reason that the elections are so, I would say, discombobulated, right? We have cell phones that you can do everything on, but the election process, because it's mixed with politics, is still back in the 18th century.
Well, we like our hanging chads.
Yeah, but so long as it's cost effective to prescribe painkillers versus fixing the pain or the causation of the pain, they're going to continue prescribing painkillers.
Well, actually, we see more often the denial of the procedure and the denial of the medication.
We see a lot of denials, yeah.
Yeah, it's getting abusive all the way around, because I have a lot of constituents who are telling me the same thing. They have a chronic life pain that's never going to go away, and now they're being denied the opioids, the painkillers that they're living on. And it's because of this new legislations.
All good takes. I can't thank you enough. And unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm going to give you a minute to close up, and go ahead and take the show away for the last 60 seconds, Mark.
Steve, thank you again for having me on your show, of course, but it's imperative that everybody gets out and vote your values. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's about your community. Do you want an advocate in Washington, D.C. for your communities to deal with the opioid epidemics, to deal with the mental health care, with the homelessness issues, the things that are important to you here? Because the things that are happening in Washington, D.C. are going to continue going on. But what's happening in your community is what you're voting on. this time around. And the incumbent, the one I'm up against, refuses to debate me on these issues.
And refuses to come on the show. Please continue.
Exactly. Refuses to be held accountable by the constituents that voted me on. So this time around, it's imperative that you vote your values and for a community advocate that's going to go to D.C. with your voice and bring back what your concerns are, rather than bringing back the trash from Washington, D.C. and making you eat it. So please visit my website at markreedforcongress.com, to my Twitter feed, Mark Reed 1776, or my Facebook at Mark Reed 2018.
Another great show for my Chief of Staff, Dr. Mike Zyma, U.S. Congressional candidate for my district, Mark Reed. My protege, Attorney Robert Ozeron, from Uncle's studio on the board, working out the technical difficulties. Scott Walton, back in Munich, Germany, Attorney John Scalia, and all the good people back at WorkComp Central that continue to support and approve of this project, including, but not limited to, Leaf File and Jake Paris. My name is Steve Appel. We'll see you again next week for another edition of WorkComp Matters.